across the oceans till we found the American dream.
Yay.
Thank you for inviting me into your home once again. My name is Ingrid Lemme, and this is my show, American Dream. A show about people, their hopes, their dreams, their family heritage, and their unbelievable realities, often unbelievable realities. My guest today is somebody I wanted to thank since years, because he is the very reason that I'm here today on television talking to Tri-State New York about his life. Frazer Dougherty.
You have to talk a little bit louder than that because I could barely hear that.
You did? You didn't?
Well, I'm not deaf really or anything, but just you were whispering.
Okay, so I'm going to talk as loud and precise as I can.
Yeah.
Okay, is this better?
I hear every word President Obama says, for instance.
Okay, I got you.
So,
okay.
Do you think it's because I like him?
I don't know, because he speaks precise and clear.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Frazer Dougherty, I became familiar with the moment I entered LTV.
Watch that word.
LTV. Familiar. Well, I got to know him. First familiarized myself because you had already a legend then to your name, and I didn't know you. All what I knew is...
What year was that?
That was about 17 years ago. And
So,
16 or 17 years ago, I walked into LTV Studios. Now, for those who are watching us, Tri-State New York, LTV is a local access station where many of us television people today actually started and got their original kick into the world of TV. And people were doing television, and you were running LTV. I think you were the president at this point of LTV.
I was the chief cook and bottle washer.
So, good.
I did everything.
You were everything? You were even giving producer
Eric Glanbard
courses.
was the brains, the techie guy.
Mm-hmm.
Without Eric Glanbard, we wouldn't have known what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And Jill Keefe was, Eric Glanbard and Jill Keefe were an item. Mm-hmm. So they came as a package. Mm-hmm. And it was really Jill's idea. And Bill King and I came along because they were short $1,000, as I remember, to reserve the tower behind One Stop. Is that right, One Stop?
One Stop
behind,
Market, yeah.
Yeah, One Stop Market. They needed to because it was going to be a low power television station. Mm-hmm. And low power got very, very complicated. So Jill and I said, let's go to public access for that. Nobody knew what public access was, right, including us, really.
Mm-hmm. But why did you want a public access station, period? You had to put a lot of your own money into this project.
Well, public access was the only true voice then, and even still, theoretically now, that people can go there and say what they think. If you go to the newspaper and say, tell your story, the reporter hears what you've said and writes the story.
And then there's an editor.
Well, yeah, then there's an editor, then there's somebody that writes the headline. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the headline never really connects, in my opinion, with the story. Mm-hmm. The headlines are dramatic, more dramatic than the story. So, but the teller of the story can't ever tell his own story unless he gets on the soapbox.
Yes. So you wanted a voice.
This is the electronic soapbox.
Yeah.
You get up there and
Frazer Dougherty wanted a voice for the people.
And I can remember you wanting to...
A voice.
Yeah.
Why did I want a voice? You asked me, well, what's the title of the show? It's not that easy. What's the title of the show? And I said, well, I'd like the show to have the name American Dream. And you looked at me and you said, oh, really?
You said you had a bigger accent then,
Yes,
did you?
very much so. And honestly, and I wasn't as fluent as I am today.
Yeah.
So there were certain obstacles. But Frazer Dougherty said, well, hey, if you can put it together, you're on. That's all what it took. And did I put it together?
Do you remember our first show? What was the first show?
My very first one I ever did was...
We had to get that out and play it.
Was with Steve
with what we're
Hawley.
talking about, yeah.
Steve Hawley of Hampton, which is today an award-winning PR agency. Steve Hawley was my very first ever guest.
Was he?
And my first director was Mr. Tyke. So, Vic.
Now,
Mr.
I've
Vic
never
Tyke,
been on your show, have I? But,
until today.
yeah. Hey.
Can you believe it?
How about a kiss?
I don't know how many years later, but I am I think at least 15 years on the air, probably close to 16. I've interviewed over 500 people.
Have you really?
Yep. But during this lifetime...
And you never came on my show either, did you?
No.
My Hello show?
I didn't.
Did you?
No,
You didn't?
I didn't. Okay,
but see,
so...
that's your fault.
That's my
Because
fault.
on my show, you had to ask yourself, you had to invite yourself. I never invited anybody, never.
Yeah, and I never invited myself. All right, Frazer Dougherty, now we're going to go to where it all starts, because we're going to stick true here to the American dream idea. Give us a little bit about your family heritage.
My
Please.
family heritage?
Yeah.
I was born under a rock.
They found you under a rock? Okay.
Yes. Actually, I was born at home in Philadelphia. And I don't have I have a baptismal certificate, no birth certificate.
Okay.
So if I were going to run for president, I might be in trouble.
You might be in trouble.
So, and I've been thinking about that.
Wasn't that a problem when you went on, what's that called, Medicare? I think when you go on Medicare, you do need to produce your birth certificate.
I don't remember that.
No?
But it worked for the military. I was a pilot during World War II.
Yeah.
I was in the cavalry first.
My God.
I graduated from school in 1940 and went into the infantry, and then transferred from because my father was the commanding officer of the local Berryville National Guard unit, and that was the biggest mistake I ever made in my life, to go off to war with my father. Can you imagine?
No. No, to be honest, I can't.
And the reason that I did that is because my girl that I was chasing was 4 years older than I, and she knew all about the war and everything like that. And she was Joe Kennedy's secretary when he was ambassador to the Court of St. James.
Really?
And they were and so I was trying to do everything I could to live up to her level of acceptance, really. And then I transferred from the cavalry into the Air Corps, which is where I wanted to be in the beginning. And when I got through flight training and got to be an officer with wings, she called me up on the telephone and said, "Let's get married." So I'd made the grade when I graduated.
She called you and said, "Let's get married."
Yes, that, yeah.
I love
well, we
it.
talked about it
Yeah,
and everything,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I said yes, but, you know, by all means. So,
Love the story.
so that's.
So how did you get from Pennsylvania then to the Hamptons?
Well, Paige, the mother of my 4 children, and I got divorced. It was all my fault. I ran into a lady who we had some kind of magnetic problem.
That does happen.
Do you know what I mean?
It happens,
It
yes,
was sort of like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
we were in the room and
I
we
think
glung together.
I think they call it chemistry, yes.
Okay. I call it electrolysis or
Okay.
something like that.
It does happen, yeah.
Anyway, we got divorced, and Frances Ann and I married. And Frances Ann was the real mother of LTV. she hated it and loved it. She loved it because of what it did, the people thing that you were just talking about. She loved that. She became a producer, and Eric Glandbard taught all of those ladies. He was the teacher for everybody in the beginning, and they all fell in love with Eric. And it's interesting how somebody like that had that kind of magnetism. All ages loved Eric Glandbard. And she hated it because it took so much of my time away. You know, we'd go home at night or something, and I'd turn on the television set, and it was black. In those early days, we had 4 decks, and they were enslaved to each other. And when one deck stopped, it kicked off the next deck. Yeah. And they each had 2-hour tapes in them. So that's 8 hours right there. And that covered the night. And I would get up out of bed or whatever, and I'd go fix it.
In the middle of the night?
She didn't like that.
I can understand that. I remember that there were times, many years ago, where LTV was running black. And we would call, pick up the phone, and we would call, because we're very proud of our local access station, we would call and say, hey guys, you are running black.
This was us you were calling.
Yes, LTV studio at that point.
Yeah, good for you.
You know what? I don't need to remind you what television is about. It's all about commercials and making money, unless you're on LTV. So I have to take a break now, and we're going to send these guys for a little break.
Oh, really? We have a commercial? Ba, ba, ba. Congratulations.
All right, taking a break.
Yay!
Thanks for staying with me, and Frazer Dougherty, the father of LTV, East Hampton's, or the East End's local public television station. I know he doesn't like when I say that, but that's it, so don't even bother complaining.
Okay.
Frazer Dougherty. It's a very tough name for this girl who has worked on her accent to be.
Just say, forget the Dougherty.
Dougherty. Frazer, eventually LTV became so big that LTV actually had festivals and events and parties because you guys needed to fundraise. We did. This was a very expensive game. Some people were paid. Where did the money come from? So fundraising is, as it always was and still is, essential. Where did the money then come from, and where is it coming from today?
Today, I don't honestly know. I've been sort of removed from LTV since the year 2000. Okay. About 2000. But initially, we had to get the community involved, and Elaine Benson was key to that.
Now, we should explain that Elaine Benson is a very famous art collector.
The Benson
Gallery.
Elaine Benson Gallery in Bridgehampton.
Bridgehampton, yeah.
And she was a darling, and she was a darling because she lived in Southampton. She loved the whole idea of public access television, and she never saw it. She never saw what she loved because that's Southampton. Yeah. And it was always from the very, very beginning our dream of having the whole East End, North Fork, Shelter Island, and the South Fork see LTV or see public access, that it would be, and they were really controlled by the cable companies. And initially there were 3 cable companies here. There was Salmon's Communication, which had East Hampton. There was the Times Mirror that had, and then the third one was, I can't think of it right now. But there were 3, and they didn't really talk to each other. And so it was complicated. And finally, Salmon's now runs everything. And occasionally Salmon's and WVVH, when we had big things going on, we all sort of teamed together, and they broadcast things that were going on that we thought were universal, that were community-oriented. And there's something that I'm glad, in a way, in my reluctance not to being with you, because I love being with you, but in being on the air and talking about this, is one of the things that I've always wanted to do was have the courts be on television. That you go, the television, WVVH and LTV or whatever, go to the courtroom.
Yeah.
Because there are still things that go on that the public should know about. And they're not allowed.
Why is that?
The judges don't want it, really. Sometimes the courts don't want it. And if you want a case, you know, something videotaped, the defense and the prosecution have to agree to it. But it shouldn't be that way. It should be, they should be there so that the nitty-gritty.
But says who? Says Frazer Dougherty
things
or the judge? I mean, the people?
Well,
who says, you know, what I'm
you can't get stopped for going and sitting in the courtroom.
Okay.
And if you ever do that, I urge everybody to go sit in the courtroom. And they're going to be amazed and shocked, depending upon where it is and what's going on. But there are many things that go on that seem wrong. And if they were publicized, if they were common on the air, I don't think they would happen anymore.
Sounds good. Makes sense.
Interesting.
Good. How can we change that?
I don't know. I talked to, the reason that I'm so vehement about this is that I talked to a retired judge down in Florida and asked him, and he said, yes, I agree, they should be videotaped.
How about we put Jackie LaFaro on this and ask her?
Well, it's an interesting point, and it's worth the battle, really. A lot of bad things go on in the courtroom.
Things we are not aware of, which the public should know, because?
Go to, sometime take a minute and go sit in a courtroom, even the local courtroom in East Hampton.
Yeah, which I have never done, except once when I had a ticket. And I felt that this ticket wasn't right.
Well,
wasn't correct. So,
anyway,
Frazer Dougherty.
I got off the track. I'm sorry.
No, you didn't. Your family life, you are obviously a grandfather of.
I'm a great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Yeah, it's okay. Of many. Grandfather and great-grandfather of many. Tell us about your children.
Well, I got
the legacy.
I got married again, and Frances Ann was a darling, and everybody loved her, and she was a theater person. She ran the National Repertory Theater, which toured classic theater in repertory around the USA. And Eva Le Gallienne was the star of the big star, and Farley Granger and Denham Elliott, and they were darling and charming, and I did as much of that as I could, and went around with her. And then they were actually opening Ford's Theater for the first time since Lincoln. And it was the same year that Kennedy was shot. So the whole thing fell apart because of that, and because of some other shenanigans that went on down in Washington at Ford Theater. And then Frances Ann and I took a sabbatical and went to Greece, bought a sailboat over in Greece and sailed around for 1 year, and then at the end of the year looked at each other and said, let's stay another year. And we ended up by saying 10 years.
Boy.
And
you must have liked it there.
Well, it was beyond description, beyond description. And and consequently, I'm happy to never go to sea again. No, that's not quite true, but I'm happy sitting here with you, Ingrid.
Thank you. Thank you for staying in the
moment
with me.
To see you. I haven't, how long has it been since?
A few years. A few
10
years.
years.
Yeah. Oh, at least.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's-
Until
yeah.
Hamptons Television, WVVH, came along, Ernie and Greg Shamizi, and said, Ingrid, you are so cool, we want you on our station. That was it, and there I was, gone from LTV. For a while, we still ran the shows and LTV as well, and then as it is with
This
every
show run on LTV?
No, for a while we did that
Ah,
still
yeah, I remember,
simultaneously,
yeah.
and then we said, nope, that's not the right way to go.
Uh-huh.
And then we left LTV entirely, but we shall be eternally grateful to them. Well, until
Yeah.
Kingdom Comes, we are, and now we have to take a break. As you know, in the world
Okay,
of
a
commercial
commercial
television,
break.
we do this.
And shouldn't we get a bigger clapping machine?
Thanks for staying with me and Frazer Dougherty. I have to do this again.
Okay, so again, actually without applause.
That was
let's go
good.
to the
Okay,
question.
okay.
You did it right. That was fine.
Okay.
Good. So,
Um,
Ingrid?
Frazer, there are the wildest stories out there, to be honest,
my God.
about about your life. But the most intense one is probably the flying car. We all know that you are an accredited pilot. You have done a lot of work. You did quite a few inventions. But we want to hear the story, please, about the flying car. What was that about?
The thing that I have the most fun with sometimes when I go back into history is that at first I was in the cavalry. During World War II, I was in the cavalry.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that, Reagan used to say he was in the cavalry, and he was really in the movies in the cavalry, but I really was in the cavalry. Anyway, during the end of the war, I was a pilot to General Frank O'Driscoll Hunter, who was the commanding general of the 1st Air Force. And I was his aide and pilot. And
Unbelievable.
one night, Grover Loning, who was an aeronautical engineer, had a party, and Paige, my first wife, and I, the mother of my 4 children, and I went to dinner, and he had guests, a guy by the name of Robert Fulton, and Robert and Sally Fulton. And we got talking, and Bob Fulton worked for Louis DeFlores, the Special Devices section of the Navy, and was a new flyer, and flew around in a plane that he, I guess, bought. And when he got to the airport, he was stuck without any ground transportation. So he thought this is being new. He thought this was no good. So he bought an airplane, and took it apart, the guts of it apart. So he separated the flight unit from the engine, put 4 wheels on this part, made quick connects for the attach, and came up with a flying automobile. We met at dinner, and he told us about this. And when the war was over, he called me up and said, Frazer, would you come down and test fly this machine? And
Yeah.
so in Middleburg, Virginia, right after they're off of a grass strip, which was the dumbest thing we ever did, we flew. It was, because there was no place to go. And he was a nut about the press and everything, that somebody would see this thing and steal it,
Yeah, yeah.
So just a little bit west of Middleburg, Virginia, we flew this thing off a grass strip that I knew about. And that was the first flight, and I became the test pilot of that. And one year, we flew down to Princeton, New Jersey to be with some friends. And I had to go back to Danbury, fly from Princeton to Danbury back. And we had the Airphibian, Paige and I had the Airphibian. And so I took off, said goodbye to the Stevens, and drove around and got lost in Princeton. I mean, can you imagine getting lost in, do you know Princeton?
No,
Anyway.
no, I don't.
Well, it's stupid to get lost in Princeton, but I did. And I was driving down the street, and there were these 2 geezers walking down the street. So I pulled up beside them and put the window down, and it's a big 150 horsepower engine, and you have to talk loud, and there's this silver bug with wheels going out, like, 4 wheels and everything like that. I said, excuse me, do you know where the airport is, how to get to the airport? And this guy turned around and went like this. and it was Albert Einstein. And so he not only didn't say, "What are you driving?" But he didn't know where the airport was.
Yes.
And so,
how did you know it was Albert Einstein?
well, anybody knows what Albert Einstein looks like.
Yeah, yeah. You couldn't believe it.
No, well, I didn't really think too much of it then, but it
In retrospect,
seemed to be
you
a nice
do.
story.
Yeah,
So I,
yeah. Everybody agrees? Nice story. Thank you.
he's dead now. He can't refute it. So.
Great story. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
I found a new life